at Talk Live with Omar Qureshi, YouTube, and Tammy. We are
Hello.
in here. Yeah, and Tammy, hello, hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
It's cool. And again, we are with a wonderful educationist, a wonderful instruction coach, John Meehan, with us. More details will be coming, and Tammy will be telling us who is with us and what he does and what fantastic work he's doing and what big game-changing things he has in his pocket, in
Yep.
his luggage, in his big luggage. So the thing is that Talk Live is a collaborative project of Pakistani ASCD and ELASCD, and there is a crawler on the footer of this show. You can subscribe to our channel, and we try to get the best voices from the world to be with us and to get benefit from their thoughts, their ideas, their wonderful experiences. So over to you, Tammy. Tell us who is John and what does he do?
Well, John's a pretty cool guy. We're going to talk about an exciting topic today, game-changing student engagement. So just a bit about John. He's an English teacher and school instructional coach at Bishop O'Connell High School in Arlington, Virginia. His first book has just come out. You can see on his shirt there, EDrenaline Rush. Just came out in June. And it's published by Dave Burgess Consulting. And the book offers a game-changing look at student engagement strategies inspired by theme parks, mud runs, and escape rooms. You heard me right. Lots and lots of fun. John is also an ASCD Emerging Leader, and he's an alumnus of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Teacher Advisory Council, and the recipient of the 40 Under 40 Award from the Leadership Center for Excellence in Arlington, Virginia, which, I mean, again, another educator who's like done nothing in their career. Exciting. Like, it's quite a laundry list that you've got there, John. Pretty exciting stuff. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, both of y'all, for having me. I'm so pumped to be here. So thank you for taking some time this morning to catch up.
Yeah, thank you. So we, as you know, we have kind of quite a list of questions for you. So we're just going to get right into it. And as you know, the show is, did we lose
Umir?
Hopefully he'll be back in just a moment as he's the one airing the show. But we'll just keep going, I guess. If we have to repeat, we'll repeat. As you know, the show is an affiliate venture between Pakistan ASCD and the Emerging Leaders Alumni Affiliate. So one of the things that we like to know about our guests is, how did you become a part of ASCD? How have you kind of gone through a leadership path to become an emerging leader and your work with ASCD?
Yeah, it's actually a funny story. So I work at a Catholic high school in Arlington, Virginia, and there's not a lot of representation at ASCD in the Catholic space, or vice versa. It's a lot of public schools, and my principal is big into ASCD and has been for a really long time. But he actually joined the school after I had already been there for a while, and I was kind of hitting a rut in my career. My wife and I worked in the same school, which is great. And I joked that I joined the school to be with my wife, and then like a year later, she's like, "No, I'm out of here." So she went. She teaches at a school now closer to our house. But I was kind of getting restless, and at one point at the Catholic school, we had a mass, because we have church services as part of our thing once a month. And I just had so much to do. I just wasn't at mass. I was like making photocopies or something. And the principal saw me in the hallway, and I was like, "Oh no, here we go. I'm in real trouble." He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'll be honest, I'm slammed, I'm overwhelmed. I have a lot of great ideas, but I don't have 2 seconds to take a breath, to use the restroom, to make a photocopy, and I'm sorry to miss this services today, but I see myself like as a game changer, and I just feel like I'm stuck." Mm-hmm. So when he said that, he goes, "Have you thought about being an instructional coach?" And I was like, "That sounds great." And then he walked away, and I plugged up my phone and I Googled, "What is an instructional coach?" Because I had no idea. But the principal asked for it. It's like, when you apply for a job in Hollywood, when they ask you if you can do it, you just say yes.
Yeah.
So he's
Figure it out.
He's like, "I want you to come to this conference with me." It was in Houston that year. And we basically did like a 72-hour job interview where he and I went to the conference. and we cooked up like a strategy for how we
there he is. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's it. It's like how we could make that program work for our school. And that led me to ASCD. And then because it was such a great thing to kind of fill my tanks up with early, I was like on the job training. Since then, it's just been like go, 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 go. So that led me to ASCD, presenting at their conferences at the state level of Virginia. The people in Virginia are fantastic. It's a really, really strong chapter. And then the state or the national headquarters for ASCD is not too far from my school. So I was able to connect there.
Awesome.
And then I had a friend who was an emerging leader. He's like, you got to do this thing. So one thing led to another. Here we are.
Yeah, that's awesome. Really cool journey, and seemed like a natural fit, actually. So was one of the, because as an emerging leader as well, and we're going through the process of choosing the new class this year. So, you're asked like kind of what are your goals as an emerging leader? So was writing one of your goals on your list?
A good question. I said in a very pithy, but like a very direct statement to my principal, he's like, what do you want to do? And I said, to be honest, I want to change the world, whatever that looks like. And he's like, cool. I think we're on the same page with that. Yeah. And I'm dead serious. Like for 5 years, I've signed every email to him, every text message to him. It says, changing the world, changing the world, changing the world. I heard a presenter at a conference one time say that reading is breathing in and writing is breathing out. And for the job in the past 5 years, I've traveled as an instructional coach, probably there's 24,000 miles around the planet. And for my job at this small Catholic school, and I've traveled 36,000 miles to conferences. Whoa. Yeah. So I've been racking up those miles and just thinking and like filling up my sponge and, in pieces and parts, sort of squeezing it out when I got back to school, got into Twitter, got into, blogging. And then after a while, you're just like, I got a lot of stuff here and let's roll the dice. So.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome.
Yes, ma'am.
That's great. That's great. So I went offline for a while because my internet signals issue.
At least you're back. You're back.
Yeah. Again, I'm back. I'm good. Okay. So, John, the book EDrenaline Rush came out like a couple of months. Like it was last month when it got published.
June 16th.
Yeah, right. So it's about changing students' engagement in a huge way. So tell us about your ideas about game-changing student engagement.
Sure. So I like to take a cue from Dave Burgess, who wrote Teach Like a Pirate. And in the first pages of it, he says, do you have lessons in your classroom that you could charge money for? He says, he thinks that there are certain days where he could put a cash register outside of his classroom and people would pay a small sum of money to come into the room. In my own class, because I'm at a Catholic school, I could tell you dollar for dollar what each class is worth in the building. Just break that math down based on tuition. And so you kind of ask yourself, is today's lecture or today's quiz or today's discussion worth $10, $12, whatever it is? And I don't think so. I mean, I think a lot of school is just the routine and the process. And so I kind of use that phrase about changing the game as sort of like a riff, but like, let's do it. Let's find ways to get kids excited. And in my own life, I run marathons. My family does a trip every year to Walt Disney World to run the Disney Marathon. And somewhere in there was like the germ or the idea for the book, which is a marathon is a lot of work, like a lot of work. But people are having the time of their lives when they're in Disney World, cheering and screaming and like, you can do it. And they're holding up signs that say, go random stranger. You're so good at exercise. And like that, those lines from Moana, the village believes in you, like that's really empowering. And I think about the fact that like, when you look at a theme park, it's designed to separate you from your money, but to trick you into thinking you had such a good time that you'll come back and do it again. And it takes you outside your comfort zone, roller coasters and like whirlwinds and things that just are, anxiety causing. And yet we happily pay money hand over fist to go to those places. So like, I think so much of education tends to go into the research and like, look, man, you want to talk research? I'll talk research all day. It's a big part of my job. But for kids and like the boots on the ground in the classroom, they need to see that excitement, that energy. And I really do believe that as an educator, our passion for our craft really can like be palpable and you can feel it. Mr. Rogers says the best teacher is someone who's doing what they love just in front of you. Like you get to watch that, right? And I wanted to take away the performance element of the teacher as the presenter, as the star, and turn the classroom into so now it's a big old like academic marathon where it's all y'all are here, and I'm cheering for you, and I'm screaming for you. And that's where the amusement parks do a really good job. Where the mud runs, like those obstacle course races, where people are jumping in the pits of ice and water and barbed wire and fire. It's like, that's crazy. But there's something about that like the ice bucket challenge. You want to grab that bucket, flip it over your head, and challenge your friends to do the same thing. So like, what can we do to replicate those things in a classroom environment where it still feels safe? Always safe. Like, keeping your kids' social emotional stuff first. You got to do the Maslow stuff well before you can do the Bloom's stuff. And let them feel like it's a place where we can take risks, where we'll make a mess. Yeah, we're going to be standing in lines for like roller coasters, but I promise you're going to have the time of your life on the way.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, John, I have one question. It's a supplementary question,
Go for it.
Suddenly I become all genius. Okay, so my question is, like, there are two kinds of learning. One is mandate-based learning. Now, what I mean, like, I have a mandate to appear in the exams, I have to do the assignments, I have to work a lot, I have to do all the homeworks and everything, whatever is given by the school. And the other one is the learning which is from inside, that is engaged learning. So now, if there is a mandate-based learning and there is engaged learning, how do you see the difference between these two? Because most of the times, when we deal with the teachers, they do say that, fine, it's okay, engagement is a good thing, but we have high mandates as well. The students have high mandates as well, especially when they go to the higher classes.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think I'm very blessed in some ways because I work at the Catholic school. So we have a lot of flexibility where we can, what ASCD would call whole child, right? Focusing on more than just the test scores, the standardized. That said, we still have curricula, we still have standards, we still have essential questions and unit goals and objectives, transfer skills. That's all the mandated piece of it, right? The other stuff is the intrinsic, and I think we have to recognize, Dan Pink talks about it in his book Drive. He says that carrots and sticks are really kind of passé. Do this or else we'll do that, and then we kind of clobber them. He says a great example of that is if you have children at daycare and you leave them at daycare 5 minutes after pickup time. They'll say to you, hey, if you leave them 5 minutes late, we're going to charge you for a whole nother hour. And then parents are like, well, I want to race to get there. But what they find, in fact, is most parents don't show up 5 minutes late now. Now they show up 58 minutes late. Because if you already had to
You're
pay
paying for it.
Right? I just got an hour of mommy time. And sometimes you need that, right? So what he says is, carrots and sticks are passé. And that's that mandated thing. He's like, we have to talk about intrinsic motivation, which comes from three things. He says autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I use that in the classroom as a real example of what real intrinsic learning looks like. Traditional homework doesn't work because traditional homes are not all the same. Like, not every home is doing the same thing when kids go home. We don't know what that looks like. And so to be more culturally responsive and aware of like the social emotional needs of our kids, if a kid is passing your class with an A, why do they need to do homework? That makes no sense. To, quote, teach them responsibility when it only can hurt the fact that they've already mastered the content. Meanwhile, a child who doesn't know the work, especially to go home and teach themselves, we don't know what that home environment looks like. We don't know if they're traveling on a bus, if they're playing sports, if they're taking care of a younger sibling, if they're whatever that looks like. And so we just grind that child into the ground. The game becomes a game of school. So teachers become this, you talk about mandatory. We assign more points for the homework, 10 points every day for each of 10 days. And then they get to the test and they bomb the test because they didn't really understand it, or they copy that homework for 10 days. They have a perfect homework score, and then they rack that up against a 0 grade or like a 50% of the test. We average the two of them and we give them a score and say, let's now move to the next unit. Like, that to me is a game. And the kids figured out a long time ago that they can just game that system and not have to learn. So as an educator, you have to figure out, okay, so how do I get them some autonomy here? How do I give them a sense of mastery and teaching to mastery? Talk about standards-based grading and portfolios, projects, performance-based. And how do we get some real purpose in this so they can see that this is not just me shoving stuff at them. It's the reward for correct answers is always harder questions. And there's a sense of growth and mastery, which is what comes from things like the Spartan races, because the race is not against anybody else but your own personal best time. And I think that for me has been really empowering to kind of tap into my lesson planning so it feels more like a game plan, which becomes more fluid and more self-reflective.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So,
that's cool.
Yeah.
So,
Umair, I'm gonna jump in with my next question. Sorry, because this is a good segue.
Yes, go ahead.
So you're just talking about, the kind of planning piece of it and the game of it. And I'm a huge firm believer in creating experiences versus planning a lesson. And you talk a lot about that I'm about halfway through your book, but you have that connection to the Disney experience, right? So it's all an experience. It's not just like one isolated thing that's happening. There's all these things happening at the same time to make you feel good about where you are. So can you tell us a bit about the importance of creating these learning experiences for students rather than just those lessons that are like written in your book, or like those 45 minutes, here's our lesson, and then it's over. And how does that change the level of engagement for students?
Absolutely. I think that students recognize teachers who go the extra mile. And that's a sport metaphor, but I think it's true. They see somebody who's showing up every day, who's excited to be there, who gives them that high five, that fist bump, that handshake at the door, and says, "Hey, come on in. I'm so excited. You don't want to miss what's up today. Like, I can't wait to get you in the seats and let's do it." And I think that Disney does a really, really good job of that. Walt Disney was a big fan of what he called plussing it. He says, the park is a living thing. It's never meant to be finished. And so in the going to it, there's always something new to look at. There's these little details that they didn't have to do, but they do it. My wife talks about when we go around Christmas time, on the side of one of the big hotels, they have a giant holiday wreath, like a big Christmas wreath. Mm-hmm. And it's probably like 50 feet tall. She's like, this park experience would not be any better or worse without that thing. No one would ever ask you to put that up, but they still think to put that up. And when they think to do stuff like that, every little piece of this thing kind of helps you enter what Johan Huizinga, the Dutch theorist, would call the magic circle, which is when you step inside of this world, all the other world disappears. And just for a second, you believe your suspension of disbelief, right? Like you're in the world of X. Like in Disney World, they don't sell newspapers. They don't sell tabloids. They don't want you to see the news of the day. They want you to be there in that time, in that place. And it's very crafted. It's very calculated. And in some ways, it's a facade. But what it's doing is like creating a movie-like experience where you walk into this theme park. And the first thing you see is like movie-style posters advertising each of the rides. And then you go on those rides and they tell you a story while you're on that ride queue. So you feel like when you're riding Space Mountain, you're actually going on a space adventure. It's not just a roller coaster in the dark. And they don't sell chewing gum because in the parks, even though they'll make millions of dollars off of every last Disney candy under the sun, they won't sell chewing gum because they don't want those things to be stuck on rides or on the floors, because they want you to feel like, the rumor of the place is that every night they repaint parts of Main Street, USA. So every day you walk into the park, it's like the day it just opened up. And that is a really powerful thing because that extra level of detail in the Disney Institute, which is like their PD wing, they write their handbook and they say they can sum up the entire experience in one phrase. They say, at Disney, everything speaks. And so that feeling of the cobblestones beneath your feet, that's slightly different in like Adventureland versus like Tomorrowland, or the little attention to detail, those hidden kind of icons or symbols that they're going to hide throughout the thing to keep your eyes distracted, to help you distract from the fact that you're in line for a long period of time. That is so powerful, and that's why you're willing to spend more money at Disney than you would at your local fairground. And so in the classroom then, how can we replicate that same thing? It could be something as small as each new unit, you have a different color handout, the red unit, the green unit, the blue, and whatever it looks like. But in my class, I looked at my ceiling and I said, I could hang my essential questions from the unit directly from the ceiling, so that while we're learning together and we have 2 extra minutes to kill in class, we literally have questions hanging over our heads that we can throw up to and say, hey guys, this reminds me of this thing that's right up there. Can we talk about that? And students appreciate that level of, it's just a little bit. It doesn't cost money. It costs investment of creativity and time. Because when kids come in and they're looking around the classroom like a wide-eyed, you got them. And you can ride that momentum moving forward into the next activity, the next game, the next challenge, the next unit. And it really gives a cohesion and a sense of purpose to really help that broader storytelling pull through the school year.
Awesome.
So I just got an idea, like I would have been a railing on the ceiling and having many questions hanging. So I'm pulling out those questions which have been addressed.
Yes.
And every day we have a new
like a ticketing system. I love it, like a laundromat, like where they just sort of push the button and they go.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I just got an engineering degree. Perfect.
Or if my school allows me to have a conveyor belt in my classroom, so the questions are riding on the conveyor belt coming in and going up, it would be looking nice.
Love it.
It's a perfect idea. Anyway, John, tell us about what brought you to the point that made you say something needs to change.
When I was at I had a chance to spend a summer with a lot of PD in the summer. I went to Phillips Exeter Academy, which is in New Hampshire, and I saw the Harkness Method in action for a week. And I came back to my principal. I'm like, this is amazing. How do we do that in our classroom? Because Exeter has like a 6-to-1 student to teacher ratio, and there are people who pay like $40,000 to go there. That's not my school. That's not most schools. He's like, you have to find a way to get the kids to want to engage, because it's just Socratic seminar the whole time. And so, the discovery of new information leads to new questions. So actually, I was reading a book by David Bohm called On Dialogue, and he says there's a difference between dialogue and discussion. Discussion comes from the same root word as concussion and percussion, which means like to smash things apart and break them down. Where a dialogue is literally from the Greek words logos, meaning words, and dia, meaning through. So just like a shared understanding through words. And to create an experience in a classroom where we're working together to get to a deeper understanding rather than trying to prove that we were right and smack the other guy down. So that led me to Paulo Freire and Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and getting rid of this commodification of like this banking model where it's like, I give you grades as a reward for you giving me your information. And it talks about this radical surrender to being a teacher leader, which means you have to work on behalf of the people by immersing yourself in the things that are of interest to them. And he speaks about it as literacy and liberation theology or philosophy in Central and South America. But I'm talking about liberating kids who are at different reading levels or a different socioeconomic background, or speaking from, like, I'm at a Catholic school, but I have a lot of students who are non-Catholic. I have a lot of students who are non-white. They're not native English speakers. And like, I have to understand what is interesting to them and what is motivating to them. And then humble myself and be nimble enough to say, look, I can get you to read Shakespeare, but we'll talk about that in a minute. You have to see that I'm here for you. And if that means that I have to like be a little bit more outside of the box to start, let's do it. Let's do it. Because that all teaching is relational. It's based on that first thing. If they don't trust you, they won't work for you. And you need them to work not for you, but for themselves. Because if you get hit by a bus and you disappear, like, they need to keep working and they need to keep learning without you. So like, I really try to humble myself in that. And I know it's weird to be like a guy who writes a book or talks about it on podcast about like how humble it is, but my kids are the star of my show. It feels like an episode of a TV program and they're there doing the work. I just kind of get to be the executive producer who sits behind the scenes and sets up games and challenges to help them, kind of bring out their best selves.
Okay, thank you, John. There is a question. You can see that question on the screen. And the lady is Sashta Banu, and she says, can a teacher alone make that kind of class?
I think so. I think genuinely it starts with a question. And the question is to the kids, what can we do to make this class more engaging for you, or more exciting for you, or more empowering for you? Because we all want the same thing. Nobody comes to school wanting school to suck. Like, we want them to have a good day. They don't want to go to class if it's not going to be a good day. And like, starting with those conversations, even like Google Forms or Google surveys, like, totally anonymous. Be honest with me. If we're on a date together and I have broccoli in my teeth, I want you to tell me. I don't want to wait all night and find out afterwards, right? And so I ask regularly, like I check in every 3 weeks at the end of a unit. What can we do to make this better? How can we get this right? How can we improve it? And that is a small change where they can see, like, there's a lot of pressure to be that fun teacher, that exciting teacher, but they know that you jump through hoops of fire for them, so they'll start moving for you. I think that's absolutely a very small, easy first step to make to really shift that culture for empowerment. Mm-hmm. That's a great question.
I think that's a good question to lead into my next question, because in your book, you talk about making some pretty risky moves. There's one piece at the beginning of your book, which I don't want to give away because it's kind of fun to read. But it is pretty risky for some teachers to, it is a letting go of the control and, being that facilitator, that executive producer, like you said. So what advice do you have for your teachers in your school and teachers in general when you're going through your coaching cycles to help teachers get to that point, to feel okay with taking some risks and opening up student engagement?
I think it's important as a disclaimer, like every action pro ride comes with a warning, pregnant mothers should not ride if you have health or issues, right? Like there are certain things that should not be made light of. There's certain things that should not be made jokes of, that should not be made games of. And in a classroom, like trust your good teacher spidey sense on those things because you don't want to ever make light of real trauma or real anxiety for students. That said, theme parks, mud runs, escape rooms all put you in situations where there is a lot of anxiety and pressure. Mm-hmm. And it's doing it with the promise of, but we'll be safe the whole time. And I talk about the acronym SAFE, where a theme park delivers specific, actionable feedback expediently. Specific, actionable feedback expediently. So in the classroom, the risk you're taking is, can they learn immediately what they need to do next so we can undo it and make it better and then move forward again and again and again. The support of a good admin team is really helpful for that. But setting those small micro goals, and I kind of talk about that in the book, so you're replacing micromanagement of everything has to be controlled to, I've created a scenario, or I've created a world here. There's operating rules that we're kind of all agreeing to. But when you play baseball, you're racing to second base. Right there on the fly, you either know that you're safe or you're out. But you're not out forever. You're just out that time and you have a chance to try again. So like we're talking about try again, teaching to mastery. And again, that specific feedback really, really fast. Because starting small allows you to feel confident in growing those skills from a warm-up activity through, let's say, a lesson, from a lesson to a unit, and then a unit into a quarter, into a whole year of pedagogy with that approach. And I think that those risks don't start with everything. Don't do something crazy and big. Because if it falls, then you give up on everything. Rather, take those incremental signs as success and say, what can we do to move it forward? But again, making sure at all times your students know that they're safe and supported, and that your admin team knows, yeah, you're going to take some risks, you're going to make some mistakes, it's going to be messy, but it's not ever done with anything other than the best interest of the learners at the dead center of everything. Has to be.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
So we've just got a couple minutes left, Umair, and I know John's kind of on the schedule.
So my next question is, how do you relate questioning to the engaged learning in the context of cognitive development?
I'm sorry, repeat it. I just cut out for a second.
How do you relate questioning to the engaged learning? To what extent questioning works good in engaged learning when we talk in terms of cognitive development?
Yeah. I think about Bloom's taxonomy a lot, and I kind of use that as my driver. It's but one taxonomy. It's not the Bible for everything, and I want to make that clear for everyone. But look at that triangle. You remember before you understand before you apply and analyze, and then you can do those highest levels of evaluation and creation. I want to spend as much time at the top of that pyramid as I can in my own practice and in my own classroom. And the Socratic seminar is one that can lead to that very, very quickly. So the questioning process is we start with those low-level taxonomy questions to make sure we get all the runners off the base. Then we can start those runners moving forward with those next levels of questions. And there's a great app I found that's fantastic for iPad. It's called Equity Maps. And it's like $2.99, I think, for the base version. Maybe the Primo version is like $10 US. But it tracks your Socratic seminar dialogue patterns as if it was like a Fitbit for your conversation. So you can see how evenly they're passing the ball around and how many people are talking for how much time. After it's done, it gives you a breakdown of like a dashboard of the number of times each person spoke, the amount of time each person spoke, and then like an equity quotient. And it'll divide it by gender if you want to and kind of slice and dice it. So I could take that data and give it back to my students, and like a good marathoner, they reflect on, okay, so where are we? What can we do better? And how will we move that ball forward for the next one? And it gives it color-coded scores and things like that, where you have achievements and whatever that looks like. Likewise, you can set class against class against class, where they're competing to see who can get the strongest seminar. And the strongest is not by the highest equity map score, but strongest in that they're bringing depth and rigor to those conversations, because it's not just enough that everyone talks. It's the depth of what's being contributed and the text evidence and like the metacognitive process behind that. And that for me is really exciting. It's sort of geeky and it has very little to do with games, but it uses a small game-inspired element to really have people competing against themselves, to really push that depth of knowledge so that there's never just a plateau in the workout. Just like a marathon, you always have something you could do better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like all your analogies to like baseball and running and Disney. I'm an analogy person too, and it helps to like solidify, gives me a better visualization for how things can look.
Yeah.
So it's 9:31 EST. So we will wrap it up. We sometimes ask for book recommendations, but you mentioned a lot of books as you were talking. So at some point, if you don't mind going on either our Twitter, like tweeting to us some of the books that you mentioned,
100%.
or on the Facebook page, either or both would be great. Just so people, because sometimes we have questions about those things, and also put a link. We can put a link to your book,
Awesome.
which is it's a fun read, and just lots of analogies and real life examples to help. It's a helpful guide for teachers who need some ideas and to get things rolling. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And thank you very much for your time. We know that Sundays are sometimes tough, but we try to find a time that semi-works for everybody as we're spread all over the place. So thanks very much, John. And we look forward to hearing we'll see you on Twitter, as always.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. And we are going off here in a minute. And before we leave, dear audience, I have to tell you that we have opened, let me announce one thing. The Reformers next issue is coming up, and we have announced a new issue, and we want you people to write for us and send us the manuscripts. We'll publish your manuscripts. John, do write for us as well.
I'm in.
Awesome. Thanks very much, John.
So thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Thank you for joining everyone.
Thank you, folks.
See you. Thank you.
Have a good day.